Good morning, everyone. So today we will have another episode of a health and safety topic, a very brief discussion on mobile crane operations. So this is one of the topics that our viewers have requested. So I will, since the topic is a very broad one, so I'll just focus directly on the hazards associated with mobile crane operations, and of course, what are the precautions that we need to ensure that are taking place prior to the operations. So basically, when we talk about mobile cranes, there are only five common hazards or risks associated when we are doing such operations. So the first one is the crane collapsing or toppling over of the crane. So that's the first risk associated with the work or use of crane. The second hazard or risk associated with the crane is the arm, the arm of the crane or the boom or the jib of the crane is striking structures. So this is another risks associated with lifting operations. The falling of the load that is being lifted. Okay, so another hazard or risk. The load is striking other objects or people, okay, in the lifting zone. So these are the common incidents reported. And last but not the least is the touching of the overhead cables or power lines or touching any live process equipments. Okay, so these are the five hazards. So as health and safety professionals, so these are the things that we need to look into as much as possible. So what are the precautions associated with this one? So we mentioned about this risk. So one of the precautions that we need to observe is of course to always use within the safe lifting capacity of the crane. So you have to make sure that lifting plan is prepared and that lifting plan is respected. No? So you have to make sure that the load that you are going to lift is enough, or the crane that is being used is enough to lift the load. Okay. So another precaution that we need to make sure that the crane is erected in a stable ground. No? It is carefully sit. So stable ground meaning when the outriggers are positioned, it should be fully extended. Okay, and the outriggers must be positioned in solid ground, not in soft ground, because if it is in soft ground, the moment you lift the load, the distribution of the load to the crane will be concentrated on the outriggers, and if it's soft, then there is a tendency that it will subside, imbalancing the position of the crane, resulting to toppling over. So that's the reason for that. Of course, we need to ensure that the crane we are using is properly maintained and properly examined. So this is the reason why we normally ask for third-party certification of the crane, maintenance copies or maintenance records of the crane. So that's the reason for that one. Of course, we also require the certifications and licenses of the crane operators, the rigger who's involved in the lifting operation, so that we are sure that the people who are doing the activity is trained and competent at that level. Of course, we talk about lifting plan, so the lifting plan must be prepared by a qualified person, so it has been properly computed. And not only that, there should be proper supervision, especially if the activity is what we call critical lift. Okay. So there should be proper banksman or signaler. So for some countries or for some companies, they called it as well as rigger. So but in different categories. So they have rigger 1, 2, and 3. But this is not a standard. This is like a good practice that is being implemented in some organizations. So here in Saudi Arabia, it's common for Saudi Aramco projects, or Saudi Aramco itself has designated this kind of designation for riggers. So rigger 1, rigger 2, and rigger 3. Of course, the safety devices of the crane must be properly working. Nowadays, the cranes are fully automated, so it gives you alarms if the configuration or the crane is overloaded, or the angle of the crane is already over exceeding what is as per the design, or the wind speed during lifting operation is more than the acceptable level, which is 32 kilometers per hour, or 8.8 or 9 meters per second wind speed. So that's another thing that you need to consider for to check on the weather, not just in terms of speed, but also in terms of the forecast. No? So you have to make sure that prior to lifting, you will not encounter any potential surge, or you are not expecting any crane um, weather disruption in the event of lifting. So imagine if you are already lifting a heavy load, and then all of a sudden there is a sandstorm, or there is a surge of wind, then obviously it will affect your lifting capability, or it will probably result into an incident. Okay, so never lift a load over a person. So that's the reason that as health and safety, we have to make sure that the lifting radius area is barricaded, it is secured to prevent people from crossing over during lifting operations. Not just the lifting radius, but also the superstructures, the counterweights. It should be properly barricaded also, because most of the incidents or recorded incidents involving crane operations, people get injured or even resulting to death when they are crushed by these counterweights during operations. Okay, so I hope you learned something in this video. So those are the things, common things that we normally encounter when we do lifting operations, or the use of cranes in our work sites. So again, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again in another health and safety topic. Just feel free to message me or to comment what topic of health and safety you want us to cover in the next video. So thank you, and please share the video to everyone. Good day.